In the quiet kitchens of our grandparents, simple ingredients became comforting meals that carried families through the hardest days. Tonight, we'll open that old pantry of memories, and I promise to share the treasured cheap meals that kept hope simmering when times were tough. Stone soup. They say hard times have a way of stripping life down to its bare bones, yet somehow revealing the quiet magic hidden underneath. Stone soup was one of those miracles, born not from abundance, but from empty shelves, cold evenings, and the stubborn hope that sharing could stretch even the smallest bite into something that warmed a whole room. A single smooth stone dropped into boiling water was never meant to feed anyone. It was a symbol, a gentle invitation. Neighbors would wander in with a carrot, a scrap of onion, a tired potato, each offering turning a pot of nothing into a stew that tasted like unity itself. And as the steam curled upward, stories filled the air. Stories of survival, grit, and the courage to make do. But this humble dish was only the beginning, because what came next didn't just feed the body, it challenged the spirit. Creamed chipped beef on toast. There were mornings when the house felt heavy with silence, and yet the kitchen found a way to whisper comfort back into the day. Creamed chipped beef on toast was one of those small mercies. A humble skillet of dried beef softened in a velvety white gravy poured over crisp toast that crackled beneath the warmth. It wasn't fancy, never pretended to be, but it tasted like steadiness when everything else felt uncertain. The aroma filled narrow hallways, reminding families that even during lean years, they could still sit together and share something that felt whole. Each bite carried the memory of frugal hands stretching every ounce, turning a handful of salted slices into a meal that lingered long after the last crumb disappeared. Yet as good as this was, the next dish held a secret from the cupboards that no one saw coming. Pea soup with dumplings. A cold afternoon once called for only one thing, a pot of thick, dreamy pea soup bubbling on the stove, its scent wrapping around the house like a warm blanket. Split peas softened slowly, melting into a silky green base while carrots and onions surrendered their sweetness. But the magic came from the dumplings, soft, doughy clouds that rose to the surface, each one soaking in flavor until they tasted like comfort itself. Every spoonful felt like a pause from the world, a moment where time slowed and warmth settled deep in the chest. Yet as the pot simmered gently, a faint tapping echoed from the pantry door. Quiet, rhythmic, completely out of place. Someone, or something, seemed to be waiting behind it. And when the sound continued, sharper this time, the ladle froze midair. What happens when the door finally opens? Scrapple. Mornings in old farm kitchens began with the steady crackle of scrapple hitting a hot cast iron pan. A humble block of seasoned pork scraps, cornmeal, and spices transforming into a golden, crispy masterpiece. As it sizzled, the edges crisped to perfection, while the inside stayed soft and savory, a contrast that felt like it shouldn't work, but always did. Slices were laid gently on a plate, steaming, ready to be topped with eggs or drizzled with a touch of syrup. Each bite carried the memory of resourceful cooks who wasted nothing and somehow created everything: flavor, comfort, tradition. But just as the final slice browned, the temperature in the room dipped, the flame flickered, and a low hum rose from beneath the floorboards. Not a mouse, not the wind. Something else knew breakfast was ready, and it wasn't waiting politely. Onion sandwich. When times were tight and cupboards nearly bare, our grandparents reached for one of the simplest, boldest meals ever created: the onion sandwich. Just slices of sharp, fresh onion pressed between buttered bread, its bite softened by a sprinkle of salt. Nothing fancy, nothing hidden, just raw courage in food form. The first crunch hit like a spark, releasing a flood of sweetness and heat that only onions can give. It wasn't meant to impress. It was meant to fill, to push through another hard day with something cheap, fast, and surprisingly satisfying. But as the last crumbs fell from the cutting board, a strange sweetness lingered in the air, sweeter than onions, sweeter than bread. And somewhere behind the pantry door, something shifted, as if an unseen guest had been waiting for this exact moment to make its presence known. Water pie. In the toughest years, when cupboards echoed and every ingredient mattered, our grandparents turned the impossible into a miracle called water pie. Just water, sugar, butter, and a handful of flour were whisked together and poured into a waiting crust, thin, trembling, almost unbelievable. Yet as it baked, the mixture transformed into a glossy, custard-like filling, sweet and firm, enough to slice. It wasn't glamorous, but it tasted like quiet hope, the kind you cling to when the world feels heavier than you can carry. Every bite whispered resilience, proof that even with almost nothing, comfort could still be created. But as the pie cooled on the windowsill, a faint ripple ran across the surface, like something had moved beneath it. And when the ripple came again, slower, deeper, the room fell silent. What if the pie wasn't the only thing rising? Dandelion salad. When gardens were bare and money scarce, grandparents stepped into the yard and gathered what most people overlooked: young dandelion leaves glistening with morning dew. Bitter, bright, and stubbornly alive, they were rinsed clean, tossed with a drizzle of vinegar, a pinch of salt, and whatever scraps could spare a little flavor. Somehow, this humble forage salad tasted like early spring itself, sharp enough to wake the tongue, fresh enough to lift spirits, and cheap enough to feed a family without spending a cent. Each bite carried a quiet defiance, a reminder that survival often grows right under our feet. But as the last leaf settled in the bowl, a sudden gust swept through the open window, scattering petals across the table. And mixed among them lay one leaf unlike the others, darker, heavier, and still trembling. What secret did it bring with it? Hoover stew. Born in the hardest days of the Depression, Hoover stew was the pot that never stopped feeding. Elbow macaroni, canned tomatoes, hot dogs, and beans. Cheap ingredients tossed together, simmering into a thick, hearty meal that stretched further than anyone thought possible. It wasn't pretty, but it filled bowls, bellies, and long evenings when hope felt thin. Steam curled up from the pot like a promise, carrying the scent of survival across cramped kitchens. Families gathered close, grateful for anything warm, anything that tasted like things might still turn out all right. But just as the stew reached its richest bubble, a shadow passed across the window, slow, deliberate, lingering longer than a person would. The spoon resting in the pot vibrated ever so slightly. What was moving outside? And why did it stop right at their door? Depression cake, wacky cake. When eggs, milk, and butter were luxuries no one could spare, grandparents created a marvel that defied the times. Depression cake, the famous wacky cake. Flour, cocoa, vinegar, and oil were whisked together right inside the pan. No bowl, no fuss. Just determination disguised as dessert. As it baked, the kitchen filled with the warm scent of chocolate, rich enough to make everyone forget how little went into it. The first bite was soft, moist, and deeply comforting, proof that sweetness didn't have to disappear just because money did. Every slice tasted like rebellion against hardship, a reminder that joy can rise even when everything else falls flat. But as the cake cooled, tiny cracks spread across the surface, forming a pattern too precise to be random. And in the silence, one of those cracks widened, just slightly. What was trying to break through? Potato soup. On the leanest evenings, when hunger pressed hard against the walls, potato soup became the quiet hero of the table. Just peeled potatoes, a little onion, water, and a touch of salt, nothing more. Simmered until the kitchen felt warmer than the stove itself. The potatoes softened into a creamy, rustic broth, thick enough to soothe, simple enough to stretch, and comforting in a way only hardship-born meals can be. Each spoonful carried the calm of those who survived by making the most out of almost nothing. It wasn't fancy, but it held families together, reminding them that even scarcity has its softer moments. Yet as the pot gently bubbled, a thin trail of steam drifted upward, twisting into a shape that looked uncannily familiar. And just when someone leaned closer to see it clearly, the shape collapsed, as if hiding something it didn't want revealed. Fried potato peels. Nothing was wasted in the old days, not even the scraps. When money tightened and every root vegetable counted, grandparents saved the potato peels, rinsed them clean, and tossed them into a hot skillet with a pinch of salt. The thin strips curled and crisped, turning golden at the edges, releasing a scent far richer than anyone expected. What should have been thrown away became a crunchy, salty treasure that tasted better than most full meals. Every bite crackled with resourcefulness, a reminder that survival often hides in the overlooked and the discarded. These peels weren't just food. They were proof that even the humblest leftovers could become something worth gathering around. But as the last peel sizzled in the pan, a faint metallic clink sounded from beneath the stove. Soft, deliberate, unmistakably out of place. What had been waiting under there? And why choose this moment to stir? Bread pudding. When loaves grew stale and grocery money ran thin, grandparents turned old bread into something warm, rich, and unexpectedly comforting. Bread pudding. Cubes of yesterday's bread soaked in a mixture of sugar, water, and a splash of vanilla, if luck allowed. As it baked, the edges crisped, while the inside transformed into a soft, custard-like center that tasted far sweeter than its humble ingredients. Each spoonful felt like a second chance, proof that even what seemed useless could become something nourishing, something that brought everyone a little closer around the table. In hard times, this wasn't just dessert. It was hope disguised as leftovers. But when the pan was pulled from the oven, a strange shimmer flickered across the top. A glint that wasn't light, nor steam. And as it dimmed, a single piece shifted on its own, sliding toward the edge. What was trying to come out with it? Ham hock beans. In the toughest seasons, when meat was scarce and every meal had to stretch, grandparents leaned on the magic of ham hock beans. A single hock, sometimes mostly bone, simmered for hours with dry beans, onions, and whatever herbs the garden hadn't surrendered to the weather. Slowly, the broth thickened, the beans turned tender, and the smoky flavor seeped into everything, transforming a near-empty pot into a feast that could feed an entire family. Each bowl carried the kind of strength only slow cooking and hard lives can create. Warm, smoky, deeply grounding. It wasn't luxury, but it felt like it. Hours later, when the pot was emptied and only a thin layer of broth clung to the bottom, a quiet bubbling began, steady, rhythmic, as if following a heartbeat, not its own. What rhythm was rising from inside the pot? And whom did it belong to? Rabbit stew. When store-bought meat was far beyond reach, our grandparents relied on the land, and rabbit stew became the meal that carried families through the leanest stretches. Fresh-caught rabbit browned in a pot, joined by carrots, onions, and a handful of potatoes, all simmering until the broth turned deep and earthy. The meat grew tender, the vegetables softened, and the aroma drifted through the house like a quiet promise that hunger would not win that night. Every serving tasted wild, honest, and earned, the kind of flavor that came from skill, patience, and a life lived close to nature. But just as the stew reached its richest simmer, the back door creaked open on its own, slow, hesitant, almost thoughtful. A single, muddy footprint appeared on the floorboards, fresh, small, and stopping abruptly. Who or what had come only halfway inside? Corn cob jelly. Long before waste became a habit, grandparents knew how to draw sweetness from the most unlikely places, even from bare, stripped corn cobs. After the kernels were gone, those pale, forgotten cores were simmered in water until the liquid blushed gold. Sugar and a bit of pectin turned that golden water into a shimmering jelly that tasted like sunshine trapped in a jar. Spread on warm bread, it carried the gentle sweetness of summer fields, proof that nothing was ever truly useless when survival depended on creativity. The jelly set softly, glowing like amber beneath the kitchen light, a treasure born from scraps and determination. But as the jar cooled, a thin line formed down the center, precise, straight, almost like a seam. Then the lid gave the faintest tap from the inside. What could be waiting beneath that golden surface? Garbage soup, perpetual soup. When nothing fresh was left in the pantry, grandparents relied on ingenuity to create garbage soup, a perpetual pot that never truly emptied. Vegetable peels, wilted greens, leftover pasta water, and even tiny scraps of meat simmered together, each addition building richer flavors over days. The soup evolved constantly, sometimes tangy, sometimes smoky, always nourishing, a living testament to resourcefulness. Families ladled from the same pot for weeks, never quite sure what the next day would bring, yet comforted by its steady warmth. Every spoonful carried history, patience, and a quiet pride in making more from less, turning scraps into a meal that could surprise and delight. If you love discovering these ingenious recipes from our grandparents' kitchens, hit like and subscribe to keep exploring more timeless meals. But as the steam curled from the surface one evening, a shadow passed across the kitchen wall, long and deliberate. And within the pot, a new shape was forming, something that hadn't been added by human hands. Vinegar pie. When fruit was too expensive or out of season, grandparents found a way to bring a tart sweetness to the table. Vinegar pie. A simple crust held a filling of sugar, eggs, butter, and a splash of vinegar, which magically mimicked the tang of lemons. Cinnamon and nutmeg masked the sharpness, turning what seemed like a desperate dessert into something fragrant, comforting, and almost celebratory. Each slice carried the ingenuity of a family determined to make sweetness stretch, even when the pantry offered little more than hope. The pie sat on the windowsill, cooling in the afternoon sun, its surface golden and still. But as a breeze fluttered through the kitchen, the shadows of the lattice across the crust seemed to shift, almost forming letters, almost spelling a message. What secret was this humble dessert quietly trying to reveal? Egg drop soup. During days when eggs were rare treasures, grandparents turned a single egg into a meal that could feed a family of 4. Egg drop soup. Hot broth, sometimes made from leftover chicken bones or bouillon, shimmered in the pot as beaten eggs were slowly poured in, forming delicate golden ribbons that danced like silk in the liquid. The simplicity was deceptive. This humble dish delivered protein, warmth, and a sense of celebration even on the tightest budget. Each spoonful seemed to float with care and intention, a quiet luxury born from necessity. Children watched wide-eyed as the eggs transformed before them, as if the pot held a tiny magic of its own. But tonight, as the last ribbon settled, the surface rippled on its own, not from stirring, not from heat. What unseen hand had touched the golden threads of the soup? Biscuits and gravy. On chilly mornings when kitchens were quiet and bellies empty, grandparents relied on the comforting duo of biscuits and gravy. Fluffy biscuits rose from simple flour, lard, and a touch of buttermilk, while gravy, thickened with fat, flour, and a splash of milk, carried the smoky essence of saved meat drippings. Each bite was warm, filling, and deceptively rich, providing energy for long days of labor or school, proving that flavor didn't require extravagance. The aroma filled the house, wrapping everyone in a quiet sense of security and resilience. Every plate told a story of resourcefulness, turning humble ingredients into nourishment for body and spirit. But as the gravy simmered on the stove one evening, a faint tapping echoed from the pantry. Not a mouse, not a utensil. Something deliberate. Who, or what, was waiting behind the shelves, drawn by the scent of the meal? Fried bologna. When steak and fresh cuts were out of reach, fried bologna became a childhood favorite and a lifeline for families on a budget. Thin rounds of processed meat, slashed at the edges to prevent curling, sizzled in a hot skillet until the edges crisped and the centers bubbled, served on plain bread with mustard, and occasionally a slice of government cheese. It transformed humble ingredients into a meal that felt indulgent, filling, and strangely celebratory. Every bite carried the ingenuity of a generation that made do, turning scraps into sizzling joy. The kitchen filled with the comforting smell of browning bologna, a sound and scent that signaled dinner was served. But tonight, as the last slice hissed in the pan, the spatula lifted on its own, hovering for a heartbeat before dropping. Who or what had paused in midair, watching the fried bologna with intent? Ham bone beans. When every scrap of meat mattered, ham bone beans became a quiet triumph of thrift and flavor. A single ham bone, still clinging to a bit of meat, simmered slowly with soaked beans, onions, and a hint of bay leaf. Hours passed as the flavors deepened, the beans swelling with smoky richness, turning a humble pot into a meal that could feed a family for days. Each spoonful delivered protein, warmth, and the sense that nothing, not even a leftover bone, went to waste. The long cooking transformed the simplest ingredients into a deeply satisfying dish, proof that patience and resourcefulness could turn scarcity into abundance. But as the pot simmered into the evening, a sudden soft thump came from beneath the table. What had just landed in the shadows, unseen yet undeniably present? Tomato gravy. When gardens overflowed with tomatoes but cupboards were bare, grandparents turned the bounty into tomato gravy, a simple sauce that brightened even the plainest meals. Ripe or green tomatoes were simmered with a base of butter or bacon grease, thickened with a little flour, and seasoned lightly with salt and pepper. Poured over biscuits, rice, or even slices of bread, it transformed everyday staples into a comforting, tangy dish that carried both flavor and nutrition. Each spoonful reflected ingenuity, making the most of what the season provided while creating warmth around the family table. It wasn't just a meal. It was a lesson in making abundance from scarcity. Yet tonight, as the last stir drew a rich red ribbon across the pan, a soft whisper seemed to rise from the simmering sauce. Who or what was speaking from the very heart of the tomatoes? Sugar sandwich. When pennies were few and sweet treats were rarer, grandparents crafted sugar sandwiches, a simple yet joyful remedy for hunger and monotony. 2 slices of bread, a thin layer of butter or margarine, and a generous sprinkling of sugar transformed ordinary staples into a treat that felt like indulgence. Sometimes a pinch of cinnamon added a hint of magic, making children's eyes widen with delight at the simplest pleasure. Every bite was a reminder that creativity could turn scarcity into happiness, and that even a small gesture could bring comfort and joy to a hungry heart. But as the last sandwich was wrapped and tucked into a lunchbox, the sugar crystals on top shimmered unnaturally, sparkling as if alive. Had the simple sweetness somehow taken on a life of its own? Or was someone else watching the lunchbox very closely? Potato peel soup. When the pantry was nearly empty, grandparents turned discarded potato peels into a lifeline. Potato peel soup. Thick, cleaned peels, simmered slowly with onions, salt, and a splash of water, releasing their natural starch to thicken the broth. Sometimes a spoonful of flour or dash of milk enriched it further, transforming scraps into a creamy, comforting meal that could fill hungry stomachs and warm, weary bodies. Every ladleful reflected ingenuity and care, proving that even what others threw away could become nourishment and pride. The kitchen smelled of patience, resilience, and quiet triumph as families gathered around the humble pot. But tonight, as the last peel sank into the golden broth, the surface rippled, as if something beneath had shifted deliberately. What secret ingredient had slipped in unnoticed, changing the soup in ways no one could yet see? Bread soup. When bread became too precious to waste, but too stale for sandwiches, grandparents transformed it into bread soup, a humble dish that filled both stomachs and hearts. Cubed stale bread simmered gently in broth, sometimes made from bouillon or leftover bones, until the liquid thickened and the bread softened, creating a hearty, warming meal. A beaten egg added richness and protein, turning minimal ingredients into a surprisingly satisfying dish that stretched family resources to the fullest. Every spoonful carried the care of those who knew scarcity well, proving that patience and creativity could turn the simplest things into comfort. But as the steam curled above the pot one quiet evening, the bread seemed to shift unnaturally, forming patterns that weren't random. What message could this humble soup be trying to reveal tonight? Mock apple pie. When fruit was too expensive or scarce, grandparents crafted mock apple pie, a clever trick that fooled both eyes and taste buds. Crispy Ritz or soda crackers were simmered in a syrup of sugar, cream of tartar, and a touch of lemon essence, softening to imitate tender apples. Cinnamon and a hint of butter completed the illusion, creating a dessert that felt indulgent despite scarce resources. Families marveled at how scraps and imagination became something sweet, a tiny victory against hunger and hardship. Every slice was a testament to ingenuity, making dessert a celebration even in lean times. Yet tonight, as the pie cooled on the windowsill, the crackers shifted subtly beneath the syrup, forming a faint outline, almost like a shape trying to push upward. Had the apples come alive, or was someone or something reaching through the crust? Mustard sandwich. When meat was unaffordable and lunchboxes were bare, grandparents relied on the stark simplicity of a mustard sandwich. Just a thin layer of yellow mustard between two slices of bread, nothing more. The sharp, tangy flavor masked the absence of protein, giving children the semblance of a proper meal while stretching limited resources. It was a lesson in making do, a quiet testament to resilience in the face of scarcity. Every bite carried a story of thrift, of parents ensuring nourishment despite impossibly tight budgets, and of creativity, turning the bare minimum into something edible and sustaining. But as the final sandwich was tucked away, the mustard seemed to bubble slightly, almost as if it were watching. What secret might this humble spread be hiding, waiting for someone brave enough to discover it? Dandelion greens, stir-fry. When the pantry was empty and the garden offered only stubborn weeds, grandparents turned dandelion greens into a surprisingly nutritious meal. Young leaves were harvested before the flowers bloomed, washed carefully, and quickly sautéed with a splash of oil or leftover bacon grease, salt, and perhaps a touch of vinegar. The bitterness softened, leaving a tangy, earthy flavor that paired beautifully with whatever simple starches were available. Each bite was a reminder that survival didn't require abundance. It demanded resourcefulness, patience, and a willingness to see value where others saw weeds. Families gathered around the pan, warmed not just by food but by the ingenuity it represented. If you're enjoying these nostalgic kitchen stories, hit like and subscribe to preserve more of these timeless recipes with us. Yet tonight, as the last leaf wilted in the sizzling pan, a soft rustling came from the window above. Who or what was peering in, drawn by the scent of survival on the stove, cornbread and milk. When cupboards were nearly empty, grandparents turned simple cornbread and milk into a comforting, filling meal. Freshly baked cornbread, golden and crumbly, was broken into pieces and soaked in cool or warm milk, creating a soft, nourishing dish that sustained hungry children and adults alike. A pinch of salt or a touch of sugar sometimes added extra flavor, but the magic lay in the simplicity. Nothing was wasted, and every bite provided warmth and energy. This humble pairing reflected ingenuity and care, showing that even the most basic ingredients could become a ritual of comfort and resilience. Families gathered around bowls of softened cornbread, finding fullness in both body and spirit. Yet, as the final spoonful was lifted, a faint tapping echoed from the pantry, soft but deliberate. What secret ingredient or visitor might be waiting there, unseen, but ready to change everything? Rice pudding, wartime style. When rations were tight and ingredients scarce, grandparents transformed humble rice into a creamy, comforting dessert. A simple mixture of rice, water or skim milk, a pinch of sugar, and a dash of cinnamon slowly cooked into a soft, fragrant pudding that warmed both the stomach and the spirit. Occasionally, a scrap of dried fruit or a bit of butter added richness, but even the plain version brought solace during the hardest times. Every spoonful carried the ingenuity of a generation that made the most of what little they had, proving that resilience and creativity could turn scarcity into sweetness. Families gathered around bowls of rice pudding, savoring not just the taste, but the love and perseverance baked into every bite. This was the final comfort of the list, a gentle reminder that even in hardship, warmth and care could always be shared. These meals show the power of creativity and resilience in tough times. Honor their legacy by trying one in your kitchen today. If you love this journey through our grandparents' kitchens, like, share, and subscribe to keep these stories alive.